Anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80. That is a quote from Henry Ford about leadership, really about learning. We're going to apply it to leadership today and look at what it takes to level up your capacity to lead. Brian, we've been talking a lot about leadership, of course, over this series. How are you, by the way?
I'm great. I'm
Good.
excited about this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking about really what makes a great leader. We've talked about the team they're surrounded by, the qualities that they foster within themselves, things like passion, authenticity, care. We covered skills of a leader, some necessary skills, what it takes to make tough calls, and probably most importantly, what Jesus taught us about leadership. We've looked at all that, but I think all of it ends up begging the question, how do we get it? How do we actually do that? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because although we know some people, like you, are born with the knack for leadership, if leadership really is influence, nothing more, nothing less, like we quoted on one of these episodes, we know everybody has influence.
Sure.
And therefore everybody can be a leader. So let's spend some time talking about how you've learned, what you've done. How do you actually level up your capacity to lead?
Yeah.
What does it take? What steps can a leader take or a potential leader take to actually become better?
Well, let me begin with a tangent, because something you said right there, I just want to make sure that we double back on that because it's important. On the one hand, there is a gift of leadership.
Yeah.
That people have. It's sort of like if I'm going to think about this in terms of position of faith. So in the Bible, there are these lists of spiritual gifts. So you have somebody who has, part of that list includes the gift of prayer. So prayer is not reserved just for people who have the gift of prayer.
Yeah.
Or mercy. It's not just reserved for people who have, we're all supposed to have a certain measure of it, but there are people who are given sort of an extra measure of it, if you will.
Right.
And we could talk about that more in depth another time, but that'll suffice for this conversation. If that's true, then there are some people who have the gift of leadership, the spiritual gift, sort of a divinely endowed gift. And everybody has a gift, so it doesn't make them better or more valuable.
Right.
But some people have the gift of leadership. That does not mean that the rest of us don't have any leadership capacity, right?
Right.
So what you said is absolutely true. And I think that the person who dismisses leadership by saying, well, I'm really not a leader, is really not seeing the big picture. Everyone has influence, and therefore everyone has some capacity for leadership in their life.
Yep.
So John Maxwell talks about the law of the lid, and he says people have different capacities for leadership, and there's a recognition of that. I think it's healthy for every leader to think this way. I am regularly asking the question, have I reached my lid? Have I taken the organization or my leadership in this particular place or season as far as I can? I think that's both a humble posture, but it's also a realistic posture. Like, I might not be the leader that take us to the next place.
Yeah.
And throughout the seasons of our church, I have made it a practice to ask that question before we move to the next level, if you will, to be able to say, am I the right person to take us to the next place?
Yeah.
That's just a smart question. I have people push back on that. Oh, no, don't talk like that. Well, you must talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
Good leaders are self-aware and need to be willing to grasp the reality that maybe someone else is better equipped to take the thing to the next level. So then that gets us back to our personal leadership. And for me, it's really, really important that leaders appreciate that good leaders are growing leaders. Good leaders are learning leaders, which is to say, at least the first sort of stop on the train is the recognition that I have not arrived yet.
Yeah.
So if I'm a leader and I am unwilling to grow, I either have one of two problems. Either I have an ego problem and I think that there's nothing else for me to learn.
Yep.
Or I have a laziness problem and I'm just not willing to do the work.
To do it. Yeah.
And so, well, I like the way you put that. Sometimes I actually don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Growing is hard. So it's not always a matter of want to, but it is a matter of will to, right?
Yep.
So it's really important. The leader, I think the leader who says, look, I'm done growing, I'm just not going to do that anymore, has really got to do some self-reflection. Your team, whatever organization you lead, is not going to keep growing if you are not going to keep growing. So I think the first point is so incredibly critical for leaders to understand. You have to be committed to ongoing growth. It's
Right.
just that important.
And it's a little bit juxtaposed, maybe not juxtaposed, but you mentioned the law of the lid, which was really talking about maybe the organization needs a different leader, or whatever you're leading needs a different leader to continue to grow, right?
Mhm.
But as a leader yourself, there really is, you can't ever go into it thinking that there is a lid for you
Yeah.
personally
Yeah.
in leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think you have to have an awareness, and also I think it's just a humble posture, right?
Yeah.
Because the person who is sort of overcome by their own ego thinks that there's never going to be a theoretical capacity to my leadership,
Right.
and that's just not
Right.
that's not honest,
Yeah.
and it's not humble. I don't know how far my leadership can go. I think I can continue to get better.
Right.
But I also think that the humble leader recognizes that there is a capacity.
You can't do everything.
I can't do everything, and I shouldn't. I'm not good at everything. That's okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there are two things that you have to. So once you say, okay, I'm gonna continue to be a growing leader, then I think the next piece is there's a specific sort of micro growth, and then there's a broader macro growth, if I can put it in those terms. The micro growth is the awareness that here is an area, I see it. I know I need to get better at it.
Yeah.
And the macro growth is to say, I'm not sure what it is, but I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure I can be a better leader, but I don't have a target in mind.
Gotcha.
And I think both of those aspects have to be approached by the smart leader. You have to think about both of them at the same time.
Yeah. I think it'll be good to get your answer to that question a little later.
Okay.
Because I want to ask you, as you continue to think about this, even though you've been leading a long time, where you feel like you need to grow
All right.
this season.
Okay.
But
All right.
we'll tease it a little bit.
Okay.
We'll get there in a bit. Because you said, just growing in your leadership starts almost like the cliche, like acceptance. You need to accept that you need to grow in your leadership and be committed to actually doing it, even though, you might have done it for all this time. You've never arrived.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So the next step, though, is once you're actually committed, how do you grow?
Yeah.
What are some ways that you grow once you've made the decision?
Yeah.
I need to keep growing. I need to keep pushing.
Yeah.
Where do we go from there?
I think a lot of it, our first series on this podcast was a marriage series.
Yeah.
And one of the things I said was, people get married and they think, well, I've done all, I've arrived, I've gotten married. And most people stop learning,
Mhm.
which is a real shame. And so one of the arguments I made there was keep reading. Susan and I read everything we can on marriage. We don't even have to agree with it, but it's a place for us to continue to grow and learn and form good conversation with each other about our marriage and whatever. The same holds true for leadership. I want to read everything I can get my hands on about leadership. Now there are trusted authors that I'm just going to read.
Yeah.
If Andy Stanley writes a book, particularly about leadership, I'm in it. I'm going to read it. If John Maxwell writes a book on leadership, I'm going to read it. Jim Collins is somebody I've grown very fond of. Lencioni is somebody I've grown very fond of.
Yeah.
Jack Welch wrote an amazing book called Winning. He's dead now, but he was the guy who really helped GE become a global force. A really, really sharp leader. I paid attention to him. Let's see, Malcolm Gladwell has written several books, one of which is called The Tipping Point. I really love that book, but there are others that I've read by him. So there are trusted authors that we pay attention to and read. When James Clear came out with Atomic Habits, it was a book that really reshaped the way that we thought. Of course, Stephen Covey with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yeah.
Some of these authors, as new books come out, I'm going to read them.
Yeah.
But I don't just want to limit myself to people that I know, because you end up getting sort of in a bubble. You create your own bubble.
Yep.
So I also want to read leaders from time to time that I have not heard of, or maybe I don't know as well, or even maybe some leaders that I don't particularly like.
Right.
Because I want to make sure that I'm keeping my eyes open an open posture for how I can learn and grow even from people who think differently than me. Maybe, Elijah, I would say, especially from people who think differently from me, because sometimes it's hard to grow when you're hearing the same voices who are just reinforcing
Oh yeah.
what you think you already
Oh yeah.
know.
Yep.
So for me, it's really important that we read. Also, it's really important that we welcome feedback. I want to be the kind of person where people feel free to give me feedback about my leadership, which is hard in my position. The seat that I sit in is sort of at the head, the top of our organization. A few people who are close with me, like you, know and have an ease about saying, "Hey, let me tell you something that I see that you probably want to think about," which is a nice way of saying I've got a criticism, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the people in our organization have a really hard time doing that with me because, it's just the seat that I sit in, and I get that. But I think we have to create an environment that welcomes the feedback about leadership and acknowledge this: not all feedback carries equal weight.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't. So if one person makes a complaint or gives me some feedback about something they didn't like about my leadership, I'm always going to be gracious about that. I'm always going to thank them for the feedback. But that does not mean that I both agree and take it and internalize it. If you walk in my office, or Angie Frame, or Beth Stoddard, or I could keep going with a list of people and say, I need to tell you something about your leadership that you need to pay attention to, I am sitting on the edge of my seat. I might not like it. It might not be easy.
Yeah.
But I have total trust that what you're saying has my best interest, our organization's best interest. It doesn't have an ulterior motive or anything like that.
Right.
The further away you get from yourself in terms of relationship, the harder it is the more guarded you can become, and it's not a bad thing.
Right.
Let me put it a different way. I've got a better word. The more you will filter that feedback.
Yep.
And sort of gauge what it does this person, and this is not calling anybody the devil. It's a good question though. Is there an agenda here? Is there an ulterior motive? Those are questions worth asking when they're further away. I never ask that question of you because I already know the answer to it.
Right.
But if somebody who never gives me feedback, who I don't really rub shoulders with, walks in and gives me that, I'm going to ask a few of those questions. It's natural. That is not to say that I'm going to dismiss their feedback, but I do think we have to do a little bit of filtering. I think the mistake that some leaders make is they put 3 people in their inner circle, and anybody who says anything to them outside of those 3 people, they completely dismiss. That's a mistake.
Yeah.
I've gotten excellent feedback that has helped shape my leadership from people who were not part of my inner circle. And that's all something that maybe some other people didn't see.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's okay. And I think that's really important. The leader should welcome feedback.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say that it goes back to what you were talking about with reading. Like, you of course have these trusted voices, but if you only ever rely on them, you'll just get the same feedback.
You're going to get the same feedback.
And I think it can really create, if you're not careful as a leader, essentially an echo chamber or a bunch of, for lack of a better way of saying it, yes men around you.
Yeah.
Who have learned, okay, well, I can't say this, so I'm only going to say this.
Right.
Never get out of that. If you're not actively seeking it from them, reminding them continually, like, hey, no, you really need to tell me the truth here. And then, of course, because sometimes you can get outside feedback, and then you can bring it back to that circle.
Absolutely.
And be like, hey, somebody told me this. Do y'all agree?
That's right.
And sometimes just by cracking the door open, they'll be like, yeah, I think I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
actually, I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't thought about it. But I've done that many times where I've said somebody gave me this kind of feedback and I want to know what you guys think. And most of the time, the team that I built around me, we deal with such candor with each other that most of the time, if it's sort of out in left field kind of feedback, the team around me will say, yeah, that's not true. If that were true, I would have already told you.
Right.
But every once in a while, they'll scratch their heads for a second and say, gosh, I never thought about it, but actually that's true.
Yeah.
And I do think that it becomes a really good, that team around you, your inner circle, if you've cultivated the relationships well, becomes a really good sounding board for that kind of thing. But the key is cultivating the relationships well. Like you said, some leaders put that team around them, and that team around them doesn't really have permission. They
Right.
just look like they have permission.
Yeah.
And they're all terrified that if I don't make the boss happy, if I don't say the right thing, I'm just going to lose my job or get relegated to some closet office. And I think that's not what we're talking about
Right.
here.
Definitely not.
Yeah, we're talking about authenticity. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we start with commitment to grow. We welcome feedback. We read. You've also taken us here at PCC, and of course, even before that, to plenty of conferences in the past, which you've mentioned.
Yeah, so I've sort of swung the pendulum in my life on conferences. I've always gone to retreats and conferences led by other people. I want to get exposed to other voices, and not just I can read somebody and kind of get their writing kind of stuff. But what I want to do sometimes is rub shoulders with them, get immersed into their organization, kind of touch it and feel it and see it. And there's great value in that. When I say swung the pendulum, what I mean is early in my career, I was really young and I was just excited about everything. And not to say that that's been tempered in any way, except that I think it's matured. So when we first started our church, I would go to a conference. I would learn all this stuff. I would come back from the conference and turn the place completely upside down. It was total chaos.
Right.
And I look back and I think, there were people on our team. They were like, "Oh my gosh, please don't come back from this conference." And
he's going to another conference again.
Yeah, we all know what's going to happen. He's going to come back. He's going to drop a nuclear bomb on the organization. We're going to live in chaos for about 2 months. Then he'll calm down and we'll go back to the way things were.
Yeah.
And so since then, what I'm trying to do now is when we do these things, I want to soak it in, and I'm usually looking for the one thing. What's the one thing that I really feel like can help us shape our growth, my growth as a leader, our growth as an organization internally in this next season? So we here are a few things that we've done, and because we're a church, we are often doing kind of church-centric events. Every year, we do the Global Leadership Summit. I've been doing that now for over 20 years. It has really impacted my leadership. I have connected with people like Craig Groeschel that I didn't know before the GLS, who's the pastor of the largest church in the country, a well-written, well-spoken. I've learned a lot about communicating from him and leading and all the things. But I met him, or I got introduced to him, if you will, at the Global Leadership Summit.
Yeah. So
we do that every year. For me, that's sort of the anchor event that we do. And then, for example, a few years ago, I got connected. I was in a network of some pastors. I got connected with this church in Maryland, led by this guy named John Jenkins, and the church is called Glen Arden Baptist Church. First Baptist Church, Glen Arden. I think that's what it is. Anyways, Glen Arden. And I asked him while I was there with a group of senior pastors, and I got to meet him, and I went up and I said, "Pastor Jenkins, would you ever entertain?" And he has a huge church. I mean, this is a really, really big church. I said, would you ever entertain me bringing my staff up here for a half day and just get to meet you and maybe tour your facility and learn some things from you? I expected him to say no. Church that size doesn't, they do like big conferences. Most churches that size would say, well, just, here's a conference, come to it.
Yeah.
But he said, absolutely, we would love to do that. And were you there? Did you go with us?
Yep.
It was so that church rolled out the red carpet. They fed us like we were kings.
Yeah.
They treated us with such honor. It was really amazing. One of the things I learned from them was about hospitality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
I mean, it was just over the top. So then we got to spend this time with Pastor Jenkins, where he just answered questions and just poured into us. And it was so rich. There were things that I learned out of that, but our staff also felt like the organization is investing in my leadership too. Everybody felt that way. We came back, everybody was excited. And there was some team building stuff that happened on the journey up and the journey back.
Right.
More recently, we've gotten connected with a church in Pennsylvania called LCBC, which stands for Lives Changed by Christ. An interesting thing they did, by the way, they used to be Lancaster County Baptist Church when they were one location. Yeah. Then they went multi-site, and they were like, well, this doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't want to lose the acronym LCBC, so they just renamed the whole acronym.
Yeah.
We did that too.
Hey, sounds familiar.
We did that too.
Yep.
We started out, we were Powhatan Community Church. When we decided to expand outside of Powhatan, that didn't work anymore. And I went to a few people on my team, and I said, we're going to stay PCC, so find a new name for with a P.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how few proper nouns there are that start with P that would work. We ended up with passion. But the point is, so I had gotten connected with LCBC and some leaders there. And interestingly, the network way that happened, and this is not just coincidental. I'm using this. I'm telling you this story for our listeners because it matters. It's a cool sort of networking tool. We are a part of the GLS, which I told you about a minute ago, the Global Leadership Summit. Our church hosts that, and when we first started hosting that, the head of that organization called me, asked me if he could have a phone call with me. We had a meeting by phone. And in that conversation, he was the former senior pastor, basically essentially the founding pastor of LCBC. He'd been there forever, and he's asking about our church. He wasn't trying to sell me anything. He was just asking about our church. I was telling him, and he said, "You need to talk to Jason Hamlin. I'm going to connect you with him at LCBC." So he makes the connection. I get to know the guy a little bit. I see some of the things that he's doing. I'm learning, and then I say, "Hey, you think it'd ever be possible for us to bring our staff up there and spend some time with you?" So just this year, we took our entire staff and spent half a day with the team there at LCBC. And LCBC, their church is even bigger than John Jenkins's church, than Glen Arden.
Yeah.
But here we are. I made an ask of their senior pastor. He gave us some time. Some other staff there gave us some time. And we're looking to churches that are ahead of us saying, how can we learn? How can we grow our leadership as an organization? But also each one of us on our staff, we're all saying, how can I get better as a leader where I'm at right now? Those investments you really get twofold investment. You really get 3 layers of investment. First of all, you get some networking. So you get to meet some people, and everybody walked away from that trip. Maybe not everybody, but a bunch of the people on our team walked away from that trip with a name and a phone number of somebody they could contact and say, "I've got a new network forming here." Secondly, we got the content. So Jason Hamlin, Jason Mitchell, who's the senior pastor, and others were pouring into us. We learned from them. We got some content. And third, we got camaraderie because now we're on the trip together. We rode up, we rode back. We switched around vans and got to know some other people on staff that maybe we don't rub shoulders with all the time. It was really a triple bonus that brought life to our team, and we all got better as leaders in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So people will say, "Well, that's a lot of time, and isn't that a waste of money?" It's not. It's exactly what you need to do to get better as a leader. Now, if you do this every month or once a quarter, it's too much.
Right.
You can't implement that much leadership growth and change in that short period of time.
Right.
But if you're strategic about it, you're going to get better, your team's going to get better, and the organization you lead is going to get better too. I'm a big fan of this kind of networking conference and making the ask. Just call and asking. And let me just finish this by saying we do this too with other churches who come to us and say, because there are lots of churches way bigger and way farther down the road than we are, and we are far bigger and farther down the road than other churches.
Yeah.
And so when those churches call us and say, "Hey, could we bring our team? Would you help us?" Our answer is always yes. And they'll come, and we learn from places like Glen Arden about how to roll out the red carpet and treat them well and sort of open the door and say, anything you want or need, we're glad to show it to you. We want to help. Because at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. And we want to get better as leaders. That's the important part. We want to get better. We're committed to that.
Absolutely. And you brought it up there just at the end, but you in both your stories about the churches we've been to, you mentioned that you just asked. And I think that that's something that people in general miss, but leaders definitely miss as well, or potential leaders. They just assume already what the answer is going to be. Right. And so they just don't bother asking. Oh, I don't want to bother them. They're super busy, whatever. But, at the end of the day, what are they going to say? No,
right?
Which is going to put you right where you are anyway.
Which is no loss to you,
right? Exactly.
I'm a fan of making those kinds of asks. I have gotten plenty of rejection.
Sure.
On this.
Oh yeah, you're going.
I went to there was a pastor, and as a matter of fact, I don't know if he's still there, but he was the founding pastor of this huge church in Hawaii. His name was Wayne Cordero, and he wrote a really great book called Dead Leader Walking. and I read it. I saw him at the GLS 20 years ago, really liked the guy. He had grown something substantial. He did a model that was different than I'd ever seen before. Their model of his church was never to own its own building. They were going to partner with the schools in a symbiotic way. They didn't want to build buildings. They wanted to be in the school system all over Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was given a sabbatical grant in 2012, and I part of that I took my family. We went to Hawaii, and before I went, I reached out to Wayne Cordero. I just thought, and the guy was, it's a huge church.
Yeah.
They were like, at the time, they were like 10,000 people. And I figured I'd never even hear back from him. And I emailed him, and he emailed me back. And he said, I would love to meet with you while you're here. And I got so excited. And then I got a message from his assistant that said, I'm sorry, Pastor Wayne won't be here the week that you're coming, blah, blah, blah. So I saw his system. His system was he liked to be the nice guy and say yes and let his assistant be the bad guy and tell you no. But at the end of the day, the point is that I got rejected. I actually did that twice with him, and I got rejected both times. But I'm going to make the ask.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, LCBC, we would have never gotten time with Jason Mitchell had I not asked the question. We'd have never gotten time with John Jenkins had I not asked the questions. Asked the question. So I'm going to make the ask. And like you said, the worst thing that can happen is I end up exactly where I am today.
Yeah.
But many times, these leaders want to pour into you. I will say this. How you make that ask is important. And I always say something like this. I'll say, I know that your time is valuable. Our organization and our team would benefit greatly from a little bit of time with you. We will come prepared. This is the important part. We will come prepared, and we will not waste your time.
Yeah.
Sometimes pastors will call me. This is a bit of a pet peeve, and they'll say, "Hey, our church is small or whatever, and would you be willing to give me some time? I'd like to learn from you." This has happened several times, and I always say, "Absolutely, I'd be glad to do that. Let's go to lunch." So we go to lunch, and I sit down, and I ask a question, and for 50 minutes, I never talk again. They talk for 50 minutes, and I always think, "Did you come to learn?
Yeah.
Or did you come to talk?" Because when I go to those meetings, I'm not talking.
Right.
When I ask a pastor who's down the road further, or a leader who's down the road further from me, would you give me some time? I promise I won't waste your time. I've got some questions. I'm trying to sort some stuff out. Would you help me? And they say yes. I want them to do the talking.
Right. You're there to learn from them.
I'm there to learn. I pitched this as a learning opportunity for me. You gave it to me. You're the professor. I'm the student. I'm here to listen. You're here to talk.
Yeah.
So I would just encourage every leader to make sure that you frame the point of the conversation correctly and that you execute it accordingly, because otherwise you've taken advantage of someone.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that.
Right. Absolutely. So much of this goes back to something that I think we've mentioned in this series already, but not a ton. The seventh habit of highly effective people, sharpening the saw.
Sharpen the saw.
And so essentially what you're doing by reading, going to conferences, welcoming feedback, you could list a bunch of things under there, is this idea of sharpening the saw. I feel like this has been on your mind a lot lately.
It has.
Sharpening the saw.
We took our team, so Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You mentioned the 7th habit was sharpen the saw. And I took our staff through. We did a crash course in all 7 habits, which was probably not fair to do it in an hour and a half or whatever. But anyway, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. I take a study break every summer, and part of that study break is to invest in making sure that I'm sharpening the saw, that I am growing as a leader. There's some leadership books and some other growth level books that I can't get to in the normal course of my work. So I take a little bit of an extended time off in the summer to digest this stuff so that I can grow as a leader. But essentially what Stephen Covey, he tells this parable of these two people who are charged with cutting down trees. And one of them spends less time cutting down trees because he is periodically pausing to sharpen his saw. The other guy says, I don't have time to sharpen the saw. I've got so many trees to cut down. The guy who sharpens the saw cuts more trees.
Right.
And his obviously his point is pausing the normal course of your work in order to build into your life and your work a rhythm of getting better will make you more effective, and you will actually get more done than the person who just says, I don't have time to get better. I'm too busy working.
Yeah.
this, if we can put this into spiritual terms, and we talked about this not long ago, so I won't belabor it, this is part of why God built into the rhythm of our lives not only rest every day, but rest every week.
Yes.
And the leader who says, if you're a follower of Jesus, the leader who says, I've got too much to do to Sabbath, is not just violating some religious rule. You are not availing yourself of something God intended for you in order to be not just a balanced person, but a healthy person that ultimately is more effective.
Right.
Sharpening the saw is about building into the rhythm of your life both a rest and reflection and intentionality about growing as a leader. It's just that important. And if you're neglecting it, you think you're being more productive, but you're actually being less productive.
Right. It's a good point. And it leads to the last thing I feel like you want to talk about and brings me back to the question that I mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah. Forgot about that.
Yeah, see? The teaser. Then you forget and it's back. So there you go. If you're doing all this, if you remember what we said first, it starts with the commitment to get better and that the belief that you never really arrive at some maximum level leadership. That means you always have to be evaluating, well, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
What's next for me to learn? If I never arrive, there's always another area within which to grow. So the question for you is, what is that area of your leadership that you feel like that you need to grow in right now in this season? And what are you doing about it? I know you just mentioned study breaks. Maybe that's part of it, but what is that area?
Well, I'm sure there's more than one area.
Sure.
But the thing that is on my mind a lot lately is, while I have grown in this area that I'm about to tell you about, there is still much work to be done in my leadership around this. And it is when I have to have a conflict level conversation, I still am what we call an anxious presence in that. Now, let me just, for the listener that doesn't know me, let me just qualify this and say, I don't cuss or throw things or misbehave like that.
Right.
But I get really anxious. Like I'll feel my heart beating fast and my breathing gets shallow and I just get all internally worked up. And sometimes that leaks out. You can see it. The team around me that's really close to me will say things like, "You seem really anxious," which is helpful, by the way, because they're not. There's no accusation in that. They're just naming it. This is part of healthy a relationship. But for me, being able to have those conversations without any anxiety is an area I really feel convicted about, that I have to be able to get to level up in my own leadership and get to the next place. And I'll tell you, Elijah, this is a thing that's plagued me. I'm better today than I used to be, but it is still, like, I look at you and I think, gosh, Elijah's so good at having tough conversations where he doesn't get all amped up. And Brian Pope is a good friend of ours. And
yes.
He's very much like that. I just haven't mastered that yet. So you asked two questions. The second one is harder. The first one you asked was, what's the area that you feel like you need to grow? Right. The second question you asked was, what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
And that's the piece that right now, the piece that I'm doing right now about it is I'm investigating. I'm asking questions. I'm asking questions of people like you and Brian Pope and Lenny Harris and others and saying, tell me what's happening inside of you. What's the story you're telling yourself or help me diagnose the story I'm telling myself to figure out what is it and how do I do this better? Because it's not just about putting on a show. Right. It's really not about that. If I can fix what's going on inside of me in those moments, then the rest of it will take care of itself.
Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, that's the area of leadership that I feel like I really need to fix or address or work on or grow in or whatever you want to frame it for me right now.
Yeah. Great. Well, as you mentioned, there's going to be more, but you've done tons of work in all kinds of areas of your leadership, and our church and many other churches that you've been able to help have benefited from it. So we benefit from hearing you talk about it. So really appreciate your time as always.
I enjoyed it.
We are very close to the end of this series.
Okay.
So if you've enjoyed this series so far, or the last one we did on marriage, make sure you're sharing it, make sure you're liking it, send it to your friends, your family, your neighbor, everybody, because we want everybody to be able to benefit from the wisdom, but also the reality that everyone around you has leadership potential. So they can find it, they can level it up, And if they do, we all win. So,
Right.
so thanks again for your time, Brian.
Yeah, man.
Thank you for your time listening. We'll see you next time.